Teenagers can sometimes display aggression towards their peers, behavior often dismissed as part of growing up, with hopes they'll outgrow it. Yet we sometimes overlook the severity of such actions, as a violent teenager can pose a serious threat to their surroundings. Moreover, this unstable age often coincides with first loves, and when those feelings are not reciprocated, it can lead to tragedies. Such was the case with Gabriela Law, a schoolgirl whose story shocked not only Chile, where the tragedy took place, but all of Latin America, leading to the enactment of the Gabriela Law. The girl met a tragic end at the hands of her boyfriend, a fellow teenager. She had broken up with him due to his temper and controlling behavior. The boy didn't take it well, resolving the matter in the most drastic way. He assaulted and took the life of the girl to whom he had recently professed love. He also took the life of the girl's mother, who became an accidental witness. Family and friends of the victim later claimed the tragedy could have been avoided, as the suspect had been stalking and harassing his victim. He broke into her home, stalked her in various places, and threatened to take her life if she didn't return. Dozens of witnesses heard these threats, but no one imagined he would follow through. Who was Gabriela Law? Gabriela Law Donoso was born on May 17, 2001, in the capital of Chile, Santiago. She was the only child of Federico Alcaíno and Carolina Donosa Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, loving family. Her paternal uncle Rodrigo became her godfather and doted on her, just as her grandfather Carlos saw her as the center of his universe. Gabriela grew up surrounded by love and care. Her family wasn't wealthy, but they belonged to the middle class, doing everything they could to provide Gabriela with a good life, a solid education, and a good upbringing. When she was only 5 years old, her parents decided to divorce. Gabriela lived with her mother, who didn't remarry and devoted herself to raising her only child. Her father soon remarried, and Gabriela gained 2 younger half-brothers. Despite his new family, Federico continued to support his ex-wife and daughter financially and stayed involved in Gabriela's life and upbringing. Gabriela was a kind, open, and friendly child. She was somewhat shy and modest, but this didn't prevent her from making friends and getting along with her peers. She had an angelic appearance, which elicited admiration and delight from all who knew her. Gabriela excelled at school, loved music and dancing, and was also good at drawing. Her parents did their best to nurture her talents. She adored her younger brothers, spending weekends and holidays at her father's house, which was nearby. Her childhood, overall, could be described as a happy and carefree time, surrounded by loving family members. First love. At 15 years old, Gabriela, like most of her peers, fell in love for the first time. The boy's name was Fabián Cáceres, a fellow student at her school who was only a year older. Their romantic relationship was initially innocent. They would walk hand in hand, eat ice cream at cafes, steal kisses, and generally appeared to be a happy couple. Fabián came from a respectable and intelligent family. His parents were well regarded and sought to provide him with a solid education and raise him to be a good person. However, Fabián himself was considered withdrawn and secretive, speaking to others reluctantly, avoiding direct eye contact, and always looking away. Given his non-confrontational nature, many assumed he was shy or had adolescent timidity, but it's more likely he suffered from social anxiety. Gabriela even introduced Fabián to her father, who approved of her choice, finding the young man calm, dependable, and rational. He had a serious conversation with the boy, asking him to take care of his daughter, and Fabián promised not to harm her or let others harm her. Initially, their relationship was harmonious, with Fabián genuinely trying to be attentive and caring. However, this harmony didn't last long. After a few months, his controlling and cruel side emerged. Cesare sought to control every aspect of Gabriela's life, exhibiting jealousy, deciding who she should and shouldn't associate with. He checked her phone, demanded immediate responses to his calls and messages at all hours, and when this didn't happen, threw tantrums. a young tyrant and tormentor. For the first 6 months of the relationship, Gabriela tried not to give too much importance to her boyfriend's outbursts of anger and jealousy. She was madly in love, tried to comply with all his demands, and naively believed that things would soon change, and her beloved would become the same sweet and caring boy who had recently won her heart. However, Fabián only grew more irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He began to wear Gabriela down emotionally, but over time, he stopped at mere verbal abuse. He might slap her, grab her hair, or her hands. In most cases, these actions didn't leave noticeable marks, but sometimes friends began to notice bruises on her wrists and shoulders, the places where Fabián had gripped her roughly and shaken her forcefully. Alcaino tried not to complain or tell anyone about what was happening, but her friends and family began noticing her depressed state and her eyes perpetually wet with tears. She was no longer the smiling, open, and sociable girl she once was, gradually distancing herself from friends, avoiding contact with those Fabián forbade her from speaking to. Repeatedly, Gabriela tried talking to her beloved, but to no avail. She also broke off their relationship several times, only to return under Fabián's pressure. This went on for over a year. Breakup, stalking, and threats. In the fall of 2017, Fabián found himself in trouble for attacking a classmate. Although the incident didn't occur at school, it wasn't clear what happened. He was accused of mistreatment and assault, facing possible jail time, but the case was settled out of court. Fabián was still expelled and had to complete his education through homeschooling. After this incident, Gabriela decided to end things with Fabián for good. However, he wasn't pleased. At first, he apologized, promised to change, and asked her to come back. But after her refusal, he began stalking, blackmailing, and threatening her if she didn't resume their relationship. Fabián lurked around Gabriela's school or home, even trying to climb into her room through the window. He called her dozens of times from different numbers, sent texts, voice messages, and social media messages, harassing Gabriela. His messages ranged from tearful apologies to threats, but Gabriela remained resolute in ending the relationship. Sometimes Fabián would disappear for a week or more, giving Gabriela hope he had moved on, but he'd reappear, terrorizing her and refusing to leave her alone. He followed her everywhere, like a shadow, and could show up at the most unexpected places, screaming and causing a scene. Gabriela grew fearful of being alone, always going places with friends or family. After school, she went to her mother's work, and they'd go home together. When she needed to travel, she asked her father or uncle to accompany her. This continued for several months, and Gabriela was exhausted, though she tried not to complain. The beginning of a series of tragic events. At the beginning of 2018, a terrible tragedy struck the Alcaino family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife and took her life. The children were at school, and Federico was at work, leaving her alone. The perpetrator, a previously convicted neighbor, was caught immediately. Gabriela and her mother did everything they could to support the grieving Federico and help him with the children. This tragedy temporarily distracted Gabriela from thoughts of Fabián, who disappeared during this period. Gabriela also focused on preparing for entrance exams, dreaming of becoming a student at one of the most prestigious universities in Santiago, with aspirations of studying journalism or advertising. However, the tragedy was just the first in a series of heartbreaking events for the Alcaino family. By May 2018, Fabián reappeared, beginning to stalk Gabriela obsessively. She felt unsafe everywhere, as her ex-boyfriend could climb over her home's fence or show up near her at the supermarket or mall. In early June, Gabriela sent her two closest friends screenshots of her messages with Fabián, along with some voice messages where he threatened her, demanding she resume their relationship. Gabriela admitted she feared for herself and her loved ones. However, she didn't tell her family about the stalking and threats to avoid worrying them. The last family celebration. On June 10, 2018, The Alcaino family gathered at grandfather Carlos's house to celebrate his 80th birthday. Sadly, this joyous family event turned out to be the last day of life for Gabriela and her mother, Carolina. The evening seemed happy and uneventful. The house was filled with laughter and music, and the large family enjoyed a big meal together, celebrating Carlos's milestone and wishing him good health and many more years. Gabriela played with her younger brothers and the children of her uncle Rodrigo, though she appeared somewhat troubled and distant. Her uncle decided to talk to her, asking if everything was all right and if anything was bothering her. Gabriela only gave a sad smile, shrugged, and said she was nervous without specifying why. The uncle chose not to press, thinking she'd share when ready, but later regretted this decision deeply. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriela on the forehead, told her he loved her, and assured her she could count on his support in any situation. Then he returned home with his younger children. This was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and his first wife alive. A brutal crime. Around 4 a.m. on June 11th, Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He intended to enter Gabriela's bedroom through the window and attack her, but suddenly the lights went on. The back door opened slightly, and Carolina appeared. She couldn't sleep and came to check on the noise. Fabian pounced on the unfortunate woman, pushed her back inside, and began stabbing her furiously. In total, he stabbed her 36 times, with most wounds landing on her chest, neck, and head, leaving her no chance of survival. Carolina managed only a couple of screams, but the noise woke Gabriela, who ran downstairs to find out what was happening. As she descended, she saw a bloodied and enraged Fabian, who caught and dragged her down. Gabriela held her phone, desperately trying to call emergency services, but couldn't. Fabian assaulted his ex-girlfriend, then stabbed her forcefully in the chest, piercing her heart. The single blow ended her life. He then moved her to the kitchen, where Carolina's lifeless body lay. He tried to erase his traces, wiping fingerprints and cleaning bloody footprints. He then washed himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom and quietly left around 5:30 a.m., leaving the house unnoticed by neighbors. In the following days, he acted as though nothing had happened. The grim discovery and the first suspect colleagues began to worry when Carolina missed work for 2 days and didn't answer phone calls. She was responsible and wouldn't disappear without reason. Her boss contacted Federico to find out what had happened. Federico was shocked and tried calling Carolina, but her phone didn't answer, and Gabriela's was off. He called his brother Rodrigo, who hadn't seen or spoken to Gabriela or Carolina since they parted ways after Carlos's birthday. Federico then left work and headed to Carolina's house. The house seemed empty, but their car was in the garage. Federico circled the house twice, knocking on doors and peering through windows, but hesitated to go in, even though he had a spare key. He called the police, asking them to check the house. The officers, upon learning he had a key, wondered why he hadn't used it, but Federico expressed fear of what he might find inside. At 11 a.m., he opened the door and entered with the officers. They saw 2 lifeless bodies in pools of blood on the kitchen floor. Carolina and Gabriela had been dead for over a day, but Federico, overcome with grief, screamed for an ambulance, demanding someone save them. They calmed Federico, but his behavior aroused suspicion, and he was led outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he demanded an explanation. Realizing he was now the main suspect in a double homicide, Federico was devastated. Federico couldn't understand how he could be suspected of taking his own daughter's life. Rodrigo soon arrived and was also shocked that his brother wasn't released. He couldn't believe his niece was dead, asking why there wasn't an ambulance and why no one was trying to help. Both men were taken for questioning and their alibis were thoroughly checked. Both were cleared, as they were with family at the time of the crime. Then, friends of the deceased were questioned, revealing that Gabriela had been stalked by her ex-boyfriend. They provided screenshots of his messages and voice recordings with threats. Easier to take her life than let her go. Federico recalled his daughter's obsessive suitor, whom she had tried unsuccessfully to break up with. He never imagined the seemingly pleasant boy Gabriela introduced to him could commit such a heinous crime. The police went to Fabián Cáceres' house to investigate. After the double homicide, the young man lived a normal life, interacting with family and friends, visiting familiar places, and even posting a photo on social media, playing guitar at a party. When arrested on suspicion of murder, Fabián feigned surprise and grief, claiming he loved Gabriela and would never harm her. Fabián had disposed of the murder weapon and discarded some blood-stained clothes, but his shoes still had small drops of blood, and prints from his soles were found at the crime scene. Moreover, 4 of Gabriela's classmates testified that they had heard Fabián threaten her, shouting that it would be easier to take her life than let her go. Under pressure from evidence and witness testimonies, Fabián confessed to the crime but tried to portray himself as a heartbroken lover. He claimed he hadn't intended to harm Gabriela, only talked to her, but things escalated, and he dealt with her mother as an unwanted witness. Yet he couldn't explain why he brought a hunting knife just to talk. Will he get the minimum sentence? After the autopsy and necessary tests, the bodies of the victims were returned to their family for burial. Hundreds gathered at the funeral to honor the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriela was buried in the white dress she had dreamed of wearing, but never got the chance to. Carolina was laid to rest in a closed casket, as her face had been mutilated beyond recognition. Fabián's family hired a skilled lawyer who crafted a strong defense and promised a minimal sentence for his client. During preliminary hearings, he emphasized Fabián's youth and clean record, arguing that the attack on his classmate had been settled out of court. The victim's relatives pushed for a femicide charge, but it was denied by the prosecution, as Chile's law only applied it in cases where the victim and perpetrator were married or lived together. Since the teenagers hadn't been in a close relationship at the time of the crime, the case wasn't classified as femicide during the investigation. Additionally, the lawyer argued that Fabián acted impulsively and in a state of distress. Consequently, he faced a potential 15-year sentence for double homicide and assault. The Alcaino family, understandably, demanded the harshest punishment for him. After initial hearings, the judge allowed both prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabián's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this, keeping Fabián in custody. Gabriela's Law. Gabriela's father was outraged. In a short span, he had lost 3 women close to him, all to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the deaths of his ex-wife and daughter might get away with a minimal sentence. The lawyer tried to shift the blame onto the victims, and the authorities seemed ready to accept this. So, Gabriela's father and uncle, together with women's rights organizations, developed a proposal for Gabriela's Law, which would expand the definition of femicide to include romantic relationships, even if the perpetrator and victim weren't married or living together. They were soon joined by the National Office for Women and Gender Equality, which actively advocated for the law. The bill faced opposition, as the proposed amendments would mean that perpetrators already serving time for similar offenses could face new charges and lose eligibility for early release. However, feminist organizations across the country supported the Alcaino family, staging marches and demonstrations in favor of Gabriela's Law. In late August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, amendments to the femicide law were presented at the highest legislative level. Gabriela's Law included 15 amendments, eventually approved by Congress. Now, in the Republic of Chile, femicide includes any violence, injury, or murder of a woman due to gender-based hatred, regardless of the relationship between victim and perpetrator. Furthermore, if the victim is a minor or has health issues, these are considered aggravating circumstances. Trial and fair sentence. The trial of Fabián Cáceres took place in April 2022. 4 years after he attacked his ex-girlfriend and her mother. Following the adoption of Gabriela's Law, the defense was powerless. Fabián was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances due to one victim being a minor, as well as double homicide and assault. On April 20th, Fabián was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. After the verdict, Federico and Rodrigo addressed the court, thanking the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no sentence could bring back their daughter and niece, but that a life sentence for the perpetrator would protect other women from the same fate as Carolina and Gabriela. The case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, doomsday spouses. Crimes motivated by religious beliefs are not uncommon in criminal practice. Statistics show that every year, worldwide, over 100,000 people fall victim to religious fanatics. Often these victims do not share the fanatics' orthodox views. The case of the deranged duo, Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, shook the world a few years ago and remains unresolved to this day. This story has been covered in media outlets across various countries, shocking and baffling people. It's a tale entwined with corrupt passion, belief in one's own exceptionalism, greed, and a complete lack of moral principles. 5 members of their own families, including 2 children, fell victim to this couple. Currently, the legal proceedings against the spouses from hell, as the press has dubbed them, are still ongoing. They face capital punishment for their heinous acts. However, they not only deny their guilt, but also seriously hope to escape punishment or receive minimal sentences. But let's start from the beginning and try to unravel this horrifying and complex story, an attempt to understand how people who claim to have found God completely lost their humanity. Who is Chad Daybell, and how did he become a leader of a religious movement? Chad Guy Daybell was born on August 11, 1968, in the small town of Provo, Utah, located 18 miles south of Salt Lake City. He grew up in a simple, even humble family, and was a quiet, shy child. Chad was an average student in school, without any notable talents or athletic achievements, and he was self-conscious about his weight. After finishing high school, Chad, not without difficulty, enrolled at Brigham Young University, BYU, in Utah, graduating in 1992 with a bachelor's degree in journalism. During his college years, he married a modest girl named Tamara, or simply Tammy Douglas. The couple quickly had 5 children, sons Seth, Mark, and Garth, and daughters Emma and Leah. After completing his studies, the young father worked as an editor at a local daily newspaper. However, due to the family's constant financial struggles, he also worked as a night watchman at a small church and as a gravedigger at the cemetery next to it. Since Tammy did not work outside the home and focused solely on household chores and raising their children, the family barely made ends meet. At one point, Chad decided to use his journalism education to write his own religious-themed book. His first work was published in 1999 and resembled a collection of religious stories or religious-themed fantasy. Surprisingly, the book became a hit, earning him a decent amount of money. Chad immediately quit his jobs at the cemetery and the newspaper to focus on his writing career. About a year and a half later, he published a book titled 1 Foot in the Grave. This was a popular science work in which he described his experiences as a gravedigger, pondered death, the afterlife, and soul reincarnations. In 2004, Daybell founded his own book company, Spring Creek, which he used to self-publish his works. These works discussed his beliefs about the impending end of the world, Judgment Day, and more. Some say that over the years, Chad's religious beliefs became more extreme. Chad Daybell published dozens of fiction and popular science books infused with religious themes. He began to conduct podcasts, audio, and video lectures aimed at helping people prepare for the second coming of Christ. Chad called himself an apocalyptic writer and claimed he could see the future, hearing voices of the deceased giving prophecies meant only for him. The story of Lori Vallow, biography, early marriages, children. Lori Ryan Vallow, née Cox, was born on June 26, 1973, in the picturesque city of Loma Linda, California. She grew up in a large family, alongside 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked tirelessly to provide for their many children. From an early age, Lori was particularly close to her brother Alex, with whom she shared a trusting relationship. He always stood up for his little sister and protected her. Even in her school years, Lori became a true beauty, with no shortage of admirers. An attractive, charismatic blonde with a slender figure and a captivating smile, she loved being the center of attention, and was a spirited and adventurous person. In the spring of 1992, at the age of 18, Lori married her high school sweetheart Nelson Yanes, with whom she had started a relationship in her senior year. However, the young couple soon realized they had rushed into marriage and were not ready for family life, leading to the dissolution of their marriage in less than a year. They did not have any children together. In the fall of 1995, Lori remarried, this time to a man named William LaJoya. A year later, the couple had a son, Colby, but their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years later. The boy remained in his mother's custody. In early 2001, Lori entered into her third marriage with Joseph Anthony Ryan, who officially adopted her son from her previous marriage. A year later, the couple welcomed a daughter, Tylee, but this marriage too collapsed in 2005. Notably, soon after her divorce from Joseph, an incident occurred when her ex-husband came to visit the children. He was assaulted by Lori's brother Alex, who claimed in court that he was defending his sister's honor, as Ryan had insulted her. As a result, Cox was sentenced to a fine and a short prison term. Marriage to Charles Vallow. Soon after divorcing her third husband, Lori met a man named Charles Anthony Vallow, whom she married in February 2006. He was 17 years her senior, but this significant age difference did not pose an obstacle for them. Charles had been previously married and had 2 teenage sons from his past relationships, Zachary and Nicholas. The couple initially lived in Nevada with Lori's children from her previous marriages, while Charles's sons visited during holidays or weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided a stable income to support the family. Lori, who had not pursued further education, did not work, but her husband never reproached her for it. In 2014, the couple officially adopted a young boy named Joshua Jackson, or simply JJ Vallow, who was Charles's grandnephew. JJ had autism and required expensive therapy, which his relative could provide. Towards the end of 2014, the family decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands, specifically to the island of Kauai. By this time, Colby, as well as Charles's older children, were adults living independently, so the Vallow family moved to the island as a group of 4, Lori, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. The family settled in a popular tourist area, deciding to open their own beach bar specializing in fresh juices, smoothies, refreshing drinks, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite all their efforts, the availability of raw materials, and Charles's experience in trade, the business quickly failed due to intense competition. Around this time, Lori became interested in religious literature and was particularly drawn to a series of books titled Standing in Holy Places by the aforementioned Chad Daybell. She became so captivated by the occult writer's views and thoughts that she became almost obsessed with his ideas. She purchased all his works and read them daily. The meeting of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. In 2016, the family was forced to leave Hawaii and return to the mainland. They settled in Arizona, and while Charles worked hard to provide for the family, his wife Lori increasingly immersed herself in religion, drifting away from reality. In October 2018, Lori and her close friend Melanie attended an event in a neighboring town called Preparing People for the Second Coming of Christ, led by Chad Daybell. As a devoted fan and follower, Lori was thrilled at the opportunity to meet him in person. Lori sat in the front row, her eyes fixed on Chad. He also noticed the attractive blonde, and after the event, when the writer and religious speaker decided to personally engage with his followers, Lori, as expected, stayed behind. She hung on his every word and asked if she could touch his hand. After doing so, Daybell looked into her eyes and said that they had been husband and wife in 7 previous reincarnations. Chad and Lori exchanged contact information and began communicating daily. A few weeks later, when Lori's husband went to Nevada for work, she invited the preacher to hold a gathering at her home. That day, about a dozen people gathered at the Vallow house, discussing God, the Judgment Day, and the Second Coming. Lori and Chad also agreed to collaborate on preparing people for the dreadful judgment. The pair started conducting podcasts dedicated to this event, leading sermons and writing articles. Lori became increasingly detached from reality and her family, but Charles, unfortunately, did not immediately notice this change. He thought it was a temporary obsession and would soon wear off. By the time he realized how far things had gone, it was already too late. Soon, Lori began talking about dark spirits and zombies, telling family and friends that she was chosen by God for a special mission. Part of this mission involved destroying the spirits of darkness, demons, and all evil. Charles's attempts to bring his wife back to reality failed, and more so, she began to see him as one of the dark entities that needed to be destroyed. The tragic end of Charles Vallow. By the end of 2018, the marriage between Lori and Charles Vallow was on the brink of collapse. In February 2019, during Charles's week-long business trip, Lori changed all the locks in their shared home. Upon his return, Charles found himself locked out of his own house, noticed his personal car, the family truck missing, and discovered that a substantial amount of $35,000 had been withdrawn from his account. Charles loudly called out for his wife and tried to enter the house. Lori, in a frenzied state, rushed outside, hurling threats and curses. She screamed that her husband's soul had long died, his body possessed by a demon, repeatedly exclaiming, "I don't know who you are and what you've done with my husband." Without hesitation, Charles went to the police station and reported Lori for theft, obstruction to his home and children. He expressed concerns about her threats of physical harm against him, leading to the issuance of a protective order prohibiting Lori from approaching him. The statements Charles made that evening were recorded, a standard procedure. He spoke about his wife's excessive religious fervor, her belief in an imminent end of the world, and her tendency to classify people as either light or demonic beings. The officers, while asking clarifying questions, openly mocked him, but still issued the protective order. The very next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his mother and sister. His lawyers stated that Charles was concerned about the well-being of JJ, who required special care. He knew his mother and sister would responsibly manage the insurance payout and take care of the boy in case anything happened to him. As for Tylee, her stepfather had not legally adopted her and couldn't include the legally unrelated minor in the documents. A few months later, Mr. Vallow made the fateful mistake of revoking the protective order, hoping to reconcile with Lori and save their marriage. He began visiting his ex-wife's home, missing the children, and still hopeful of family reconciliation. On July 11, 2019, Charles was fatally shot twice in the chest when he arrived to see his children. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, called emergency services and confessed to the shooting. He claimed self-defense, alleging that Charles attacked him first with a baseball bat. In response, he drew a pistol and fired twice without aiming. The incident was witnessed by the homeowner and children. Their testimonies were somewhat consistent, and the court ruled the incident as an unintentional killing in self-defense. Notably, Alex's head injury was minor, despite Charles's background as a former baseball player capable of inflicting severe harm with a bat. The same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lori threw a party at the house with music, numerous guests, and a poolside disco, right where her husband had been shot and where traces of blood were still visible. She didn't arrange for his funeral or inform anyone about the incident. Charles's sons, mother, sister, and other relatives only learned about his death a week later when his unclaimed body was still in the morgue. A series of mysterious disappearances and fatalities. Shortly after her husband's demise, Lori sold their Arizona home and, along with her children, relocated to a town called Rexburg in Idaho, settling close to where Chad and his wife Tammy lived. Alex Cox, Lori's brother, moved with his sister and settled in the same housing complex. Lori enrolled her son in a school for children with special needs, but her 16-year-old daughter Tylee did not attend any educational institution. She was seldom seen outside, leading many neighbors to remain unaware of the second child's existence. Around the same time, Lori referred to her daughter as a dark entity in a phone conversation with a friend. On September 8, 2019, the children, their mother, and Uncle Alex went to Yellowstone Park, where Chad Daybell joined them. Several photographs from that trip showed Tylee, but after that day, she was never seen alive again. On September 24th of the same year, Lori withdrew her son's documents from the school, claiming he would henceforth be homeschooled. The 7-year-old boy was also not seen afterward. Less than a month later, on October 19th, Chad's 49-year-old wife, Tammy, passed away suddenly. According to Chad, she had a cold with a cough and presumably died from respiratory failure in her sleep. With no signs of violence on her body, her death was ruled natural. Chad categorically refused an autopsy to definitively determine the cause, a decision that oddly raised no suspicions. Following his wife's sudden passing, Chad received approximately $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks later, Chad and Lori traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, where they officially married in a beachside ceremony. This event came as a total shock and surprise to Daybell's children, who were still mourning their mother and couldn't comprehend their father's actions. Upon returning to Arizona, the couple lived together and misled others by claiming Lori's children were with relatives, or even asserting she had no children at all. They also rented a small unit at a local storage facility, where they later moved all the belongings of the children as if they never existed in the home. Another month later, on December 12, 2019, Alex Cox died suddenly in his home. The cause of death appeared to be a heart attack, but at his sister's insistence, no autopsy was conducted, and the incident was deemed natural. Investigation, arrest, and horrific discoveries. As time passed, more people persistently questioned Lori about the whereabouts of her children. She skillfully lied to neighbors and acquaintances, but it was more complicated with relatives. Her eldest son, Colby, who had little contact with his mother after moving away, tried earnestly to reach his younger sister. Initially, Lori answered from her daughter's phone, pretending to be Tylee, but Colby soon sensed something was amiss. Meanwhile, Charles's relatives demanded access to JJ. They wanted to take the boy for holidays or weekends or simply talk to him on the phone, but Lori consistently refused or made up absurd excuses. Eventually, the boy's grandmother reported his disappearance to the police, and soon after, Colby also approached the police to find his younger sister. When law enforcement officers knocked on Lori's door and asked her to bring the children for a conversation, she lied that they were visiting relatives. This information proved false, and the police returned to her home. They gave her a week to appear at the police station with the children, but instead, she and her husband fled to Hawaii again. On February 20th, 2020, Lori was arrested on the island of Kauai and taken back to Arizona. A search was conducted in her and Chad's home, but neither the children nor any signs that they had been there were found. Now her husband Chad, who had been defending her and insisting she had no children, was also under suspicion. It was only on June 9th that police discovered human remains buried in the backyard of the couple's home. Forensic analysis revealed that they were the bodies of the missing Tylee and her younger brother JJ. Chad was immediately detained for concealing evidence and complicity. The authorities then decided to exhume the bodies of Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox to establish the true causes of their deaths. In both cases, traces of chemicals capable of inducing heart failure were found, leading to the conclusion that these individuals did not die naturally. The trial process. The trial of the spouses commenced in January 2021. They faced charges of conspiring to commit first-degree criminal acts, grand theft through deceit, and insurance fraud. Moreover, the demise of Charles Vallow was reclassified from self-defense to premeditated criminal action. Witnesses testifying in court stated that Lori referred to her children as dark entities and promised to save their souls. There were speculations that the deaths of 16-year-old Tylee and 7-year-old JJ might have had ritualistic elements. Notably, the adolescent girl's body was partially burned. Weeks before, Chad had sent Lori an email rating people, where he assigned Tylee a 2 as a dark spirit. Given the totality of the charges, both spouses faced the possibility of capital punishment. However, in May 2021, Vallow's defense team succeeded in having her declared incompetent, halting the trial process. Simultaneously, all 5 of Daybell's adult children insist on their father's innocence, believing he was framed by Lori and Alex. In 2022, after treatment in a psychiatric facility, Vallow was again deemed fit to stand trial and answer for her actions. In March 2023, the judge ruled out capital punishment as a sentence for the woman, a decision the prosecution is still attempting to contest. In July of the same year, she was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The trial against Chad continues, and he still faces the prospect of capital punishment. It is worth noting that this story inspired the book When the Moon Turns to Blood by investigative journalist Lily Sotail, as well as a 2021 television movie by Lifetime Movie Network titled Doomsday Mom: The Lori Vallow Story, starring Lauren Lee Smith. In addition, Netflix released a 3-part documentary series in 2022 called Sins of Our Mother, which includes an episode dedicated to Lori's eldest child, her son Colby.
In April 2015, the small town of Leeton in New South Wales, Australia, came to a standstill. Businesses closed, and the local high school suspended classes as the community was engulfed in sorrow and mourning, gathering to honor the memory of Stephanie Scott and offer condolences to her family. Over 1,000 people attended Stephanie's funeral, and a public memorial was organized for everyone to join in the communal grief. Many attendees wore Stephanie's favorite color, yellow, releasing yellow balloons into the sky, symbolizing the liberation of her spirit soaring into the heavens. The gathering prayed for Stephanie's eternal rest and comfort and healing for her loved ones. The song chosen for Stephanie and her fiancé Aaron's first wedding dance played, reminding everyone of the young couple's cruelly interrupted story, filling hearts with sadness and sorrow. Stephanie Scott, only 26 years old, was kind, intelligent, and always smiling. From childhood, she was curious and active, participating in school clubs and sports. As an adult, she followed in her father Robert's footsteps as a teacher, sharing his passion for education. She taught English and drama at Leeton High School, taking great pride in her work. Stephanie and Aaron, slightly younger than her, knew each other from a young age. They spent time together, shared interests, and played sports in their hometown. They were close friends until Aaron turned 21, when their relationship blossomed into romance. In early April 2015, Stephanie and Aaron were busily preparing for their wedding, scheduled for the 11th. Stephanie, a perfectionist, had spent months meticulously planning every detail. Almost everything was ready, with arrangements set and a honeymoon booked in Tahiti. She had recently celebrated her bachelorette party. The only remaining task was to rehearse their first dance, for which they had taken many lessons. The first weekend of April reminded them that their eagerly awaited day was almost upon them. Aaron invited Stephanie to join him at a party out of town, but she declined to finish some remaining tasks, including finalizing plans for her students during her honeymoon absence. On Easter Sunday, April 5, 2015, around 11 a.m., Stephanie Scott headed to her school in Leeton, New South Wales, to hand over some work to a deputy teacher. She parked her car on the street and walked to meet a colleague who lived nearby. Together, they opened the school gates and entered. Stephanie then locked the gates behind them and, with keys in hand, proceeded to the English teacher's office. There, she sent an email to a bus company confirming transportation arrangements for her wedding guests. After working for a couple more hours, feeling joyful that all her tasks were successfully completed, Stephanie left the administrative building and walked towards the gates. Aaron, aware that Stephanie had left and would be away for a few hours, grew worried as the evening approached. He had texted her the day before and received prompt replies. However, on April 5th, he received no response from Stephanie. Returning home after 7 p.m., Aaron found that Stephanie was still not back and her car was absent from the street. Trying to manage his anxiety, he reasoned that perhaps the stress of the upcoming wedding and leaving her students for an extended period had exhausted Stephanie, and she wanted some alone time. Yet, such complete silence was out of character for her. Even amidst the excitement of wedding planning, Stephanie had been enjoying every minute, eagerly sharing details about her dress and the wedding menu. She didn't appear nervous or depressed, but rather excited and ready for her big day. With his concern growing and sleep eluding him, Aaron texted Stephanie again in the morning before calling her family. More than a day had passed since Stephanie's disappearance, and Aaron went to the Leeton police station to report his missing fiancée. The police, after inspecting the vicinity and noting Stephanie's car's disappearance, speculated that she might have left the school and been involved in an accident or gotten stuck in a ditch or creek. Helicopters were deployed to search the area, while ground police headed straight to the last known location of Stephanie Leeton High School.
Due to Easter Sunday and the limited number of people at the school, there were few witnesses, complicating the police investigation but also ruling out hundreds of potential suspects. A check of the school's alarm system in Stephanie's classroom revealed that she had deactivated it at 1:30 p.m. and reactivated it at 1:38 p.m. This provided the police with the precise time when Stephanie was nearby, but it was the only detail they could ascertain. Detectives attempted to use phone tracking, but Stephanie's mobile phone was turned off. The last activities on her bank accounts or social media were on Saturday, April 4th. Local news broadcasts began covering the story by April 7th, while hundreds in the small community eagerly sought any information about Stephanie. However, such behavior was completely uncharacteristic of Stephanie, and as each day passed with her wedding approaching, hope began to fade. Stephanie's mother, Marilyn, stated that if her daughter was not found within the next few hours, it likely meant something terrible had happened. A reporter from a local newspaper in Leeton reported that the police resumed searching the school. They spent most of the day using digital mapping technology to study the school's premises, and specifically marked the room where Stephanie worked on the day of her disappearance. A witness near Leeton High School on Easter Sunday mentioned hearing strange noises around 2 p.m., like rustling and dragging something on the ground. He recalled seeing Stephanie's car under a covered walkway, but didn't think much of it at the time. Later, her car disappeared. Another witness, a school employee, told detectives about an odd conversation he had with one of the school's cleaners the morning after Stephanie's disappearance. Amidst the rumors and anxious talk about the missing girl, the witness asked the cleaner when he last saw Stephanie, and he replied that he hadn't seen her on the day she disappeared. When asked if he thought Stephanie might have run away due to wedding stress, the man strangely and nervously laughed, which felt unsettling to the witness. Additionally, the witness noticed that the cleaner's face had scratches. The police decided to question him for additional information. This was 24-year-old Vincent Stanford. Detectives had a brief conversation with Vincent, who explained that he stopped by the school to take out the garbage bins, although he wasn't scheduled to work that day. He claimed he was there for a short time because he was in a hurry to buy groceries. Vincent asserted he didn't see Stephanie at that time and couldn't help, but wished them luck in their search. He added that he left the school after 3 p.m. to go to the store where he always shopped. The police contacted the store that Vincent claimed to visit, only to learn it was closed on the specified date. This meant Vincent had reasons to lie about the store, making him a suspect in the investigation. Investigators decided to conduct another thorough interrogation of Vincent and went to his home, where he lived with his mother. When they arrived, Vincent was not home. His mother allowed the police to search the house, where they found a set of keys on a red and white cord, matching the description of Stephanie Scott's keys. While the police were bagging evidence, Vincent arrived in his car. He was immediately detained, and his car was confiscated. In the back seat, they found several MDF panels, seemingly stained with blood. Police also noticed tire tracks in front of the house, not matching Vincent's vehicle. Additionally, a used condom was found on the ground, with its wrapper in the bedroom. They asked Vincent where he was on that day, and pointing to a camera on the front passenger seat, he said he was taking photos. Detectives asked for permission to view the camera, and Vincent agreed with a shrug. When the police turned on the camera, the first image they saw was a photo of a burnt woman's corpse lying in a wooded area. Vincent tried to explain it away as just shots from a movie he had filmed, thinking they were funny. However, the police realized these were actual crime scene photos, with Stephanie as the victim. Vincent Stanford, the cleaner at Leeton High School, was immediately arrested. His seized phone and laptop revealed many photos of young girls, both from Leeton High School and from the internet, as well as pictures of women he obviously stalked. This painted a grim picture of his behavior. Although Stephanie's body had not yet been found, Vincent was charged with her murder on April 9th. News of his arrest quickly spread. Vincent Stanford, 24, was detained in connection with Stephanie Scott's disappearance and presumed murder. During this time, a search team found Stephanie's car abandoned in a secluded area, 8 kilometers from where she was last seen. However, her body was still missing, and the search continued. Detectives worked to identify the location where the photos with the body were taken. On April 17th, 5 days after last seeing Stephanie, another witness came forward. He reported seeing a car near a canal around 4 p.m. on Easter Sunday. A man got out of the car and threw an object resembling a laptop into the water before driving away. The police soon retrieved the laptop from the canal bed, confirming it belonged to Stephanie. Meanwhile, divers continued to search for the slain schoolteacher's body in the New South Wales River area. Reporter Natalie Cooper, in a live broadcast, discussed the ongoing search for Stephanie's body. The 26-year-old schoolteacher's body was still missing. Police scoured fields and vineyards near where her red Mazda was found earlier in the week. Police divers also explored the canal in the area, retrieving a laptop believed to be Stephanie's. Cooper mentioned a shrine near the site visited by many that morning. The entire community was deeply saddened, regardless of personal acquaintance with Stephanie. Her family and fiancé visited the shrine the previous night, lighting candles, praying, and comforting each other in their grief. The reporter also noted that police were desperately searching for any sightings of a white vehicle, believed to be owned by Vincent Stanford, the suspect in Stephanie Scott's murder. Witnesses were urged to contact the police immediately. Meanwhile, Vincent, in custody, voluntarily approached the police, requesting to speak with them. He divulged all details to the detectives, including information on where to find Stephanie's body. According to Vincent, on the day of the incident, Stephanie was in the upstairs teacher's room working on a computer with the door to her office open. Vincent was cleaning garbage bins using a pressure vacuum and needed to take some bins upstairs. That's when he noticed Stephanie. Vincent told the detectives that he suddenly had the urge to kill her and quickly went home to fetch his special kit, including handcuffs, Viagra, a knife, and cleaning supplies. He also Googled information about bride violence en route. Returning, he found Stephanie packing up to leave. When she walked past him, she looked into his eyes and smiled, wishing him a happy Easter. That's when Vincent abruptly grabbed her and dragged her into a storeroom. Detectives reminded him of the scratches on his face they noticed during their first encounter and asked about their origin. It turned out some scratches were from Stephanie's microphone and others from her nails as she defended herself while he tried to kill her. Vincent described how he grabbed Stephanie from behind, covered her mouth with his right hand, and encircled her waist with his left hand before taking her to the storeroom. He shut the door and violently threw her to the ground, hitting her from left to right. After assaulting Stephanie, Vincent used the knife to kill her. He felt compelled to do so, admitting to harboring many brutal thoughts and schemes, and having previously killed others. He speculated about having some psychological issues, clarifying that he harbored no hatred towards his victims, but simply enjoyed killing. Vincent then recalled feeling a hunger pang and decided to go home for a sandwich and coffee. Leaving Stephanie lying alone on the storeroom floor, he went to his car. After eating, he returned to the school, placed Stephanie's body in the trunk of her car, and drove her to his home, parking the car on the street. On Easter Monday, Vincent drove Stephanie's car with her body to a national park. There, he removed her body from the trunk and stripped it on the ground. He noticed many bruises and abrasions on Stephanie's face, including swelling on the right side and a bruise under her eye. He then decided to cover the body with branches and douse it with gasoline. He used a match to ignite the fire, which he discarded nearby. Vincent stayed briefly, taking several photos of Stephanie's body with his camera, then waited 5 minutes to ensure the fire was well lit before leaving. He abandoned Stephanie's car on a secluded country road and walked back to town. In response to detectives' questions about the brutal treatment of Stephanie, Vincent continued to deny such actions, although the officers knew it to be untrue. As a result, he faced additional charges of aggravated harm and physical injury to a woman. Investigators inquired why, in the photographs, the woman was undressed except for a bra. Vincent explained that he usually removes almost everything, leaving only the bra. He wasn't sure why he did this, possibly wanting a souvenir. He admitted taking Stephanie's bra. Regarding her earrings and wedding ring, Vincent claimed he didn't remember when he removed them from the woman, but likely threw them in a trash bin along with other items. In fact, Vincent had removed Stephanie's wedding and graduation rings and sent them to his twin brother Marcus, who lived in Adelaide. Marcus sold the rings and earrings at a jewelry store, then destroyed Stephanie's driver's license after taking a photograph of it. A 24-year-old man was arrested at his home in the Adelaide Hills around 7 a.m. Neighbors were shocked that the next chapter in a murder case captivating the nation unfolded right on their doorstep. It was shocking and unsettling for their small street and community. Marcus, Vincent's identical twin, worked on a flower farm. His colleagues described him as very quiet and reserved, hardly interacting with them beyond work. During the trial, Marcus Stanford had no lawyer, and when the judge asked if there were any reasons he should not be sent to Leeton, he replied with a strong Dutch accent that he had never been there and did not need to go. However, the next morning, he was taken to Sydney under police escort and remained in custody. Stephanie's family was further devastated when the police announced a second arrest in Stephanie's case, Vincent's twin brother Marcus. Finally, the search for the missing Stephanie came to an end. In fact, while Vincent was still giving his confession, the police had already located Stephanie's body. A day before her wedding date, a burnt body of a woman was found in a national park 60 miles from Leeton Middle School. Detailed investigation revealed that Stephanie had been brutally beaten on the head with a total of 40 blows, causing her death. Additionally, she had been stabbed in the neck before her body was discarded and set on fire. Photographs found on Vincent's phone conclusively showed that they were of Stephanie. Vincent Stanford's guilt was undeniable, and both he and his brother Marcus were brought to trial. In court, events unfolded unexpectedly. Initially, Vincent denied his guilt, and the proceedings became uncertain. However, based on the presented evidence and police work, it was decided that the case could lead to a conviction. Psychological tests showed that Vincent was believed to be a serial killer, posing a danger. He displayed a lack of emotions and sympathy, was merciless and indifferent, often laughing and not taking the situation seriously. Several troubling moments from his biography came to light. Vincent Stanford was born in Australia, but his family moved to the Netherlands when he was 3 years old. They later returned to New South Wales. At age 7, he dreamt of committing a murder. At 12, he nearly strangled his teacher. Classmates called him a psychopath, and due to problems with violence and disobedience, he was sent to a behavior correction school. He said he could never adapt to society and was later placed in a psychiatric center where he was diagnosed with autism and oppositional defiant disorder. Vincent told the police that after being released, he tried to enter university or join the army but was rejected in both cases. Therefore, he worked at several different places before getting a job as a cleaner at Leeton Middle School. His initial contract was for 5 weeks but was then extended. While working at the school, he often hid in the women's restroom during student lunch breaks to watch them. Examining Vincent's mobile phone, detectives found he stalked girls at the school and 2 other women working in nearby shops before murdering Stephanie. Numerous photos of one young girl, about 2,000, were found on his phone. He also kept diary entries about her, following her home several times and noting when she left, trying to determine who else was inside. One entry read, "She's home alone at 15:40, enough time to abduct." He initially targeted this young girl, but when his plan failed because she left town, he turned his attention to Stephanie, who worked at the school. Upon careful examination of Vincent's car, it was found that stains on MDF panels confirmed the presence of Stephanie's DNA. Additionally, during a search inside the Stanford home, investigators found traces of Stephanie's blood on a knife, several condom packets, and her bra. After admitting guilt in selling Stephanie's rings, destroying evidence, and assisting Vincent in hiding facts, Vincent's twin brother Marcus was sentenced to 15 months in prison. The judge noted that Marcus's sentence did not include the possibility of early parole, as there is no such practice. Marcus was sentenced to 1 year and 3 months in prison for his involvement in Stephanie Scott's murder. The sentence was to end on September 9, 2016. Had Marcus not pleaded guilty, he would have been sentenced to 1 year and 8 months in prison. In October 2016, Marcus was released. Over 60 people signed a petition calling for an appeal of the court's decision regarding Marcus Stanford, describing it as pathetic. After his release from prison, Marcus briefly returned to Leeton, accompanied by his mother. However, the local community made it clear that his presence was unwelcome and his current whereabouts remain unknown. Marcus has apologized for his actions since his release, claiming he will cause no further trouble and admitting his actions were truly foolish. He regrets his inability to change the past. Marcus wishes to have no contact with his brother Vincent and does not seek to establish any. The twins' father, Steve, expressed confusion and fear over Vincent's crimes and has no desire to communicate with him. He rules out the possibility of meeting Vincent and wants nothing to do with him. Steve stated he cannot comprehend why Vincent committed these crimes, and frankly, he does not intend to seek an answer. On the day before Stephanie's 28th birthday, Vincent Stanford was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder and 15 years for sexual violence under aggravating circumstances. Both sentences were effective from April 8, 2015. During the trial, Stephanie's mother, Marilyn, stated that Vincent was unable to cope with his own life and therefore took Stephanie's, depriving her of a chance at a happy future. They will never know the full extent of their daughter's suffering, but the knowledge that she suffered is too hard to bear. Thus, the family prefers to retreat from the public eye to mourn their beautiful girl and overcome their grief. In the future, Stephanie's relatives will not respond to questions, participate in interviews, or television programs. The day after the trial, the family planned to celebrate Stephanie's too short and amazing life on what would have been her 28th birthday, the second birthday they've celebrated without her. A tea party with mint cookies was scheduled for 3 p.m., and Stephanie's mother invited everyone to join. The Scott family also called for stricter screening and evaluation of school staff to prevent similar incidents in the future and reduce risks to students like those faced by Stephanie Scott. Tragically, more than a year after Stephanie's death, her father Robert died in a bizarre accident when a tree fell on him, leading to his death. He was buried near the same place where his daughter was interred. Having lost Stephanie, Aaron moved to Europe, hoping to heal his pain associated with New South Wales. 5 years after losing his beloved, Aaron met a new love and announced his engagement to a woman named Samantha. The community of Leeton was deeply affected by the tragic story of Stephanie Scott. She will never be forgotten, and her life story has been immortalized in books. Stephanie's family hopes that people will remember her and all her remarkable qualities, her passion for teaching, helping, and mentoring others. They believe Stephanie embodied all the good qualities of a human being and made a significant impact on many lives. In her memory, her loved ones encourage everyone to be kind to themselves and strive to do good in the world. Stephanie Scott's story leaves a profound mark that inspires everyone to live a life filled with caring for others.